Welcome to Two Gay Peas in a Podcast. Now, this week we're super excited because we have our very first guest in our studio with us.
Super excited.
I know. It was really fun creating this space over here. You're in the ugly chair, by the way. That's called the ugly chair. Now,
is that because I'm the pretty part of the ugly chair?
That's exactly right.
Only if that chair could actually talk, to be honest.
Oh, really? Oh.
The Chief Vision Officer for the Genius Network. Caleb is a stroke survivor and is passionate about creating a world where people touched by trauma are empowered, resilient, and connected. Caleb Rixon here.
Yeah.
Hello.
Aloha. Namaste.
Thank you so much.
Very official, doesn't it?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, actually, it really does. But that's very nice. So I'm grateful that that I can have any sort of intro by anyone.
Oh,
Yeah.
mate.
Nice.
Yeah, in brackets, legend.
Oh,
Total legend.
We do that.
Yeah.
Caleb and I, well, we met a couple of times.
Yep.
Yep, at the local gym when I was
did.
living in Fairfield.
yeah.
And it was a funny story because do you remember the PT?
Yes.
Yes.
Proshka.
Thank you, because I
Yeah.
never can say her name right. And if she's listening,
He
I
used
used
to
to
call
call
her,
her
like,
Pippi Longstocking.
Yeah. Oh, okay, fair
I'm
enough.
like, Bevan, it's
Yeah.
Peroska.
Yeah.
He's like, Pippi something.
Pippi Longstocking.
Pippi Longstocking.
Oh, yeah, I'm glad we can do name and fame on this podcast.
Yeah, we can. We can
Yeah.
name and fame, but
I
she,
won't do any name and shames, just in case it
Okay.
gets south, but sure.
that's all right. We'll be fine. But she grabbed me and she said, "Oh, I know someone else has had a stroke." And I was like, "Oh, cool."
Yeah.
Like it was really cool, which is good. You know,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
like
yeah.
cool. And I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yes, I know this guy that comes in here called Caleb that you might want to connect with." She was awesome.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And obviously, yeah, you came in, and I think the first time I met you, you were like sweating like a sweating
You're like a wildebeest.
like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
wildebeest.
yeah.
It's like, dude, you've left half your body on the
Yeah,
floor.
yeah, probably.
And we connected, obviously, there. From my point of view, obviously, we had some things in common.
Totally.
And at that point in time, I was sort of past getting through my journey.
Yeah.
But running into you, obviously, was fantastic to hear that someone else had gone through that.
Yeah.
And you have always been someone that, I've followed on your journey, but really related to very well. And when we obviously started this podcast, I was like, I would love to sit down and have a chat with you to see where you're at, because it's been a long time.
Yeah.
I went and pissed off to Hobart. And
I know. You
and
left
it
us
is.
just for dead.
I know.
All right.
I went husband hunting.
Yeah, I know. I think you were in early courtship stage, so you had business to attend to.
Yeah, I had business.
To like latch me down.
Yeah, I had to latch you down. Yeah, well, we sort of do.
Yeah.
But I had to latch him down and get myself to Hobart. And then I sort of lost a little bit of contact with you, but I've always watched what's been going on. And there's been a lot going on.
There has. It's been a busy few years.
It has been a really busy few years. And it'd be lovely to hear as where things are at with you now. And as we sort of maybe spoke a little bit about before, understanding your story would be great.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm really interested to know what's been going on and how things have really developed and changed for you over the last 4 years since I've actually seen you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because things are evolving. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess that's probably like a really good starting point, I think, because I think that when I actually was having a chat with someone earlier today, and I can't remember exactly how it came up. Obviously, I just walk around just talking about having had a stroke, but it's pretty much my thing.
In the supermarket.
But it was at the gym. That's right, and I was talking to someone, and then I got asked the question that I often get asked, which is how long did it take you to recover?
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting question that a lot of people ask me, because I think that, initially when I used to hear that, I used to be like, oh, it like hurt. I was like, oh my God, can you not see the struggles I have? But actually, there's a real privilege in that sort of perception of where I'm at now, because I guess to sort of go back 14 years, and what probably initially connected us was, I was 24 and I just turned 24. It was only 3 days later. I was about to start my career in the national tour of Chicago, the musical. So I was I was a very aspirational kind of, hopefully bound for Broadway kind of dude. When I was working out in the gym when a massive explosion went off in my head, and that led to subsequent, like, essentially like a loss of speaking, standing, swallowing, really thinking, communicating, until I fell unconscious. And then subsequently that was the beginning of kind of my stroke journey, I guess. Which at that point I thought I was dehydrated because I was just a bogan that wanted to be in musicals. So it didn't sort of enter my head that would be something that was going on for me, because I also didn't know what a stroke was. I think, like a lot of the population, I knew it was something that happened to older people. Because commonly it does.
And at 24, it's absolutely not something you think about.
I'm thinking about what my next gig is, or what my next drink is, or what my next something else is. I was a spoken for person. No, I was in a relationship at that time, as well. And, but that's probably an interesting, maybe just given both of you as well. And, and what connects us as queer people is kind of how that sort of traumatic series of events and experience sort of, it wasn't like I was the body that experienced that massive sort of catastrophic brain event, but essentially, like, everyone actually experienced that. Like my mum, my dad, like everyone had the stroke in a different way. And so, because a huge part of that narrative is, like, there was 5.5 weeks where I was unconscious in ICU, and, I'm sort of spoken for at that point. And so that journey is really a big community journey, I guess, for me, and without jumping to, like, necessarily the end of where I'm at. But, I think that's was maybe a good baseline for me to begin what is the recovery journey, which is what kind of my response is to people when they ask things like, the person asked me today, like, how long did it take you to recover? And just giving that little reframe to sort of go, oh, well, so I've still kind of got some things that go on, but you can't see that. And so that's awesome. But then it's more like, well, what is recovered? What does that mean? And then what does it mean to be, like, what's like a full human experience? It's like, well, actually we're all having one if you've got a heartbeat.
Correct.
It's, we've just got multiple lenses that we're seeing it through, and sometimes we want to aspire for more, and I do always want to aspire for more, but at this point, I guess I'm probably at a point where I'm very privileged because I pass, and I've experienced passing in numerous ways in my life. As someone that, I'm someone who has I identify as having invisible disability. So that requires a level of disclosure and education all the time. And though that's exhausting in some ways, it's such a fucking privilege. Oh, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah,
you can swear as much as you like.
Thank God.
Yes. You can swear as much as you like. And that's, difficult. The invisible part of it.
Yeah.
And that part of disclosure.
Yeah.
And feeling that you have to at some point disclose because people can't see it, obviously.
Totally.
Yeah, is extremely confronting. I was left with this scar.
Yeah.
But that was the visibility part of it, and I could not wait till it disappeared.
Yeah. Okay.
because at times...
Show it off, babe.
Yeah.
Here it is.
Show it off to anyone watching. Here it is. Isn't it sexy?
My sexy scar.
Wear that thing with pride.
Because whether I liked it or not, when I met people, it would draw me in to disclose. It made me disclose when I felt at times I couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. I didn't want to.
Yeah.
But it was probably a blessing in disguise that it made me have to confront that sooner than later.
Yeah, I think I sort of relate to that. And maybe my way of sort of seeing that, I kind of, I was at the very beginning of maybe something that, we'll never know what that was. But I mean, that's like if you go Gwyneth Paltrow sliding doors kind of shit. But, that sort of aspirational 24-year-old, like, I think because I was a performer, I was, you know, an actor, singer, dancer person, that level of essentially like all eyes on me and like that idea of people seeing me, you know, performance or, you know, speaking, etc., wasn't necessarily outside of my wheelhouse. So I guess it was confronting. Like, my way that I relate to that is like, it was confronting because initially I probably spent, I'd say when we met, I don't think there was any part of me that was probably had like, I probably had some shame around it still, just about the fact that.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I was a very proud, you know, white guy that wanted to sort of be perceived as like the all-encompassing, you know, I guess some sort of beacon of trust on a stage. So you can, you know, that's kind of what is required in, and you know this, Matt, like what's required on stage is like, your role is to illuminate a story for an audience, and you're responsible for taking them on that journey.
Yeah.
And so I think that's always been in my DNA. And I think, and I was at a level where I'd done a lot of training for like 5 years to get to that professional point. And I think I don't know, I guess I wanted to probably be, maybe because I was younger as well, I probably wanted to still be something else as opposed, you know, I perceive disability as weakness, 100%. But that's the same as my own gay shame. Like, I perceive that as like kind of that oddity, or not even as like, I still think a lot of it's an oddity, a lot of it's an obscurity, but I think it's actually like a beautiful thing. Like, I think it's actually like fucking, it's what makes you cool. But
too cool for school.
Yeah,
it does.
But I didn't sort of maybe, I just hadn't maybe matured in my thinking that what I've got is enough.
Oh, I completely hear you on that. Going through this creative journey as well, since I quit my job a few years ago and really dived deep into exploring all facets of my creative side and really getting into the nitty-gritty of acting and how much you learn about yourself. I've really grown to really love and embrace who I was. But earlier on, absolutely, I'm like trying to push so many parts of myself away and be some idea of what I think I need to be some like level of success or to be that person on the stage that I can envision in my mind, you know? I can't imagine what that would have been like, and I hope you don't mind me asking you if you want to go there, but I know where your mind can take you when you dream, sometimes in that incredibly ambitious time where I was at a few years ago, even if, you know, wanting it all as a creative success story kind of thing. What happened to you mentally in terms of how you identified in that creative way straight after your stroke?
Well, I mean, that's, I guess, like, it's a juicy... No, I'm very happy to disclose. Just so you know, you have my permission. No, because it's consent. It's just, you have my full consent. But I guess it's, like, so layered, like what you just sort of asked. So I'm, like, going to try and say... Because there's, you know, this is, like, all of us. Like, the fabric of all of us is actually so complex and interwoven that... You know, you pull one thread and then the whole thing sort of turns to shit. So you got to like, I'm going to try and stay on track for you. Yeah. But yeah, I guess I had this idea that I was, to be honest though, so I've kind of like stepped back from myself, and I've always had this ability. I don't know why, but I just do. And I think a lot of us do as humans, where I can sort of step back a bit and sort of observe myself in the situation a little bit. Like, you know, I've been self-indulgent and fucking all that sort of stuff. But I don't know, but I had a perspective really quickly. I think because I'm very empathetic. So, and I think the starness of me made it like I was very therefore observant of everyone, how things affected other people. So I was able to see myself through their lens, if that makes sense. So I could see straight away that, I guess, that it was a shared experience, because every single experience is to a degree, but that my aspirations, like, as this identity, like my absolute, like, my currency was my voice on a a physical, social, and a financial level.
Yeah.
So that was, that's probably a big thing that, maybe you will relate to and want to talk about even more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I was very wedded to this idea that my worth was based on my sort of productivity. And when I say productivity, that's like like I've been at too many conferences, a way of saying, sorry guys, as just saying, like, whatever my output is
equals your,
that is my worth. Whereas it's like, that's not it. It's like there's so much underneath that, and I couldn't access that quickly, like, because I still was very deeply, like, and to be really honest, like, and I'm so happy to go there, like, I started seeing a psych, like a psychotherapist for a multitude of reasons. But even, like, I stopped after, say, a few years of rehab, because I was in rehab for 2.5 years. But that was all about relearning how to walk, how to talk, how to do horse grabs to run, how to practice swallowing your own friggin' saliva, how to, see, how to move your eyes, how to do a lot of sort of those things.
All the stuff you've never had to think of before in your entire life.
No, because
Yeah.
It's like, you think that it just is. But it's like, it's that way because your brain is amazing.
Yeah.
But if you have a bit of a broken bit, you realize, oh gosh, like, I wasn't maybe like someone, I think just to go into the shame bit, because I know that sort of resonated for you. Like, when I think about that, I think that's it as well, because I for a long time was very proud that I did nothing to have this stroke. Like, I had this thing called, a dural arteriovenous malformation.
Thank you for saying it.
Yeah. Which is a fancy way of saying, like, in the lining of my brain, I had a big knot that was tangling for 24 years, and then it went off twice.
Oh, wow.
And that bleed caused what's called a grade 5 subarachnoid hemorrhage, which is basically, it's a type of hemorrhagic stroke, which that's the smallest type, like the least type of strokes that happen. Hemorrhagic is that one. Subarachnoid just means like the lowest space in the lining of the brain, where there's this, like, kind of web that's the arachnoid bit. It's like this web that lines your brain. I had a bleed there. They're graded 1 to 5. I had a grade 5. So, not
overachieving.
Yeah, I know. I was like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Got it. Yeah. I was like, I'm going to get to Whopper, and then I'm going to have the worst stroke there is.
So dramatic.
Yeah. I was like, this is how I'll
If you could have sung that in a musical, you could have done that.
Totally.
I'm having a stroke. I'm having a big one.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. I was like, and I was like, that's like the 11 o'clock number. Well, no, that's the funny thing. I sort of thought, like, even now, 14 years later, and still, I still exist. Like, even, coming into here, like, thank God, I was like, oh, I'm in shape enough to get through that little narrow door, which is awesome.
Yeah, I know. We've really shoved you in the corner of the room with the door. It looks good on camera, guys, but yeah,
he's in a box.
The pain to get here. No, it's amazing. And I love cozy little spaces. Like, I'm about to go on a plane soon, and I'm like, can you make sure that I want to be on a window seat. I actually like that
feeling.
I mean, it's probably the worst if the
like
plane,
that feeling of business class. That's what I say.
Oh, okay, right. Well, I haven't done that yet, but when I get there, I'll let you guys know how it goes. But yeah, I don't know. Like, in that shame thing, I think because I had those aspirations to be this thing that produced a lot of work and then got validated by that. I'm also the youngest in my family, so the young child kind of thing. I think that plays a role. I guess it's weird. Like, I was at a loss, but the reason I brought up sort of even psychotherapy now, 14 years later, which people go, oh my God, like you're doing all these. Yeah, well, I say people as if all these people say this to me, but I'm like, the harem of people in my life say this. No, but you know, I probably don't really stop. Like I do a lot, so I'm just doing stuff and trying to make things on many different channels kind of work to live in the world that I want to live in, which is a world where every person touched by disability or difference is empowered and emotionally resilient and connected. And because that's what I didn't have that feeling once I had acquired disability. Like I didn't even identify with that. So I think to sort of link back to the shame thing, that was also like, I don't want to lean into this thing because to me, disability means an inability or some level of dysfunction. And even though I literally have a vestibular dysfunction, I'm like, that's fucking cool. Like, and like I have to work with that, but that's a unique little talking point. And, you know, that's a privilege as well because, you know, you can have a vestibular dysfunction and that be so paralyzing that it would create an incredibly challenging minute by minute life experience, which I have a version of that. But I can, you know, I've pushed the boundaries of what I can do. So I just know my limits really well. But I think, yeah, back then, you know, I was not in control of my life. I was very happy to be on the conveyor belt of performing and aspiring to be, you know, sort of just taken to the, you know, let my hopeful talent take me to the stars.
The top.
Yeah, which is like an absolute fabricated lie.
Yeah.
Let's just put it out there straight away.
It really is.
It's
Yeah.
It's like, and I mean, you know, like all of that just comes down to like exposure and
so much luck.
Yeah, so much luck. It's not
who you know, what you're born into, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Where you are, right place, right time.
Totally.
Yep.
And that's the thing. It's like, I guess I did get to a point where I went, you know, it dawned on me when I remember wheeling myself out of a session of clinical psych in rehab. And it dawned on me that I went, I'm not going to do, well, I couldn't speak at the time. I was like pretty much non-verbal because I had a paralyzed vocal cord. But I was like, oh, I don't think I'm actually going to do Chicago. Like, I don't think I'm going to do it. And that, even now, actually, it's sort of like, it's weird, like, just because I can kind of access those feelings. Something happened then when I had to, like, really squash it to kind of go, how, like, that's everything to me. How the fuck do I go on? But I think, fortunately for me, because I was young and because it was such a catastrophic kind of injury, it affected every faction of my physical well-being. So I was busy.
Yeah, you
know,
had
like,
more to think about.
I was like, I can't, like, oh, okay, I can't do, like, you know, I'm not going to be the Spirit of Fosse in bloody Chicago next to Caroline O'Connor anymore. But I've got to now try and, like, figure out how to have a coffee with someone.
Yeah.
Maybe one day. That was, you know, my big goal in rehab. So yeah, I guess all those things, like, I didn't know the perspective shift was happening. Like, I think it just was slowly going to have to happen around me because my objectives changed. So it's like, I guess it's that thing where it's like, plant. But it's like, which comes first, chicken and egg? I kind of don't think it mattered for me. No. It was more like, it's happened, so now how do you reframe this thing? And it's changed a lot because I've literally tried to do the performing thing. I tried to do the filmmaking thing. I've tried to do the directing thing, like, and, you know, none of it's felt right. It's only caused, like, more trauma in lots of ways. Okay. And that's been a very challenging learning curve. But, you know, leading to, I guess, where I am now, it's, you know, because the focus isn't on me. It's, you know, it's selfish service, you know, to be technical. Like, that's a quote by Mike Dooley, but if anyone's heard of Mike Dooley, but selfish service. So it like fully fuels me with what I get to do, because I run a massive community called Genius Network and have started a foundation and a social enterprise that's all about increasing mental health and social connectedness of people touched by trauma. And, you know, because that's the gap that I needed. And I guess because I get to speak on that, I get opportunity to satiate that part of me as well. But again, like I don't see it as like, oh, I'm here now. I've kind of got the words to say it, but I'm just see it more as a journey, and I'm at this part of that journey, which actually has benefits for like well beyond just my own. And I think that's probably the key of the shift in my sort of life, is like not being so purely self-focused, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, knowing that you are giving back and you have created a community that you wished you could have had immediately after your stroke must feel incredibly satisfying, because you are helping a lot of people to connect and come together and talk about something that is such a unique experience.
Totally. And I guess, I actually really true. And even like there was a Melbourne hangout this morning, and like I wasn't there. So I'm like, oh, it actually happens without me, which sounds like narcissistic that I would think it. No, but like it's more that I'm like, that's the point, is that I'm like,
that is the point,
I want to build this thing that can continue on, that is, you know, yes, it's a legacy, I guess, to a degree, because I want it to be an autonomous thing that empowers people to mobilize their own community. Yeah. Because it's like, community connectedness is everything. Like even us right now, like we've all got like, whether it's a stroke bond or a queer bond or whatever, like we vibe our tribe. And I think that, you know, my thing when I started connecting with people, it was really hard to connect beyond the symptom stuff. And I was like, where's the stories? Like, why don't we have stories? Like we've got symptoms and we can share that stuff, but it's really hard to get to the beyond that bit.
Yeah, right. Just back to life.
Yeah. How do you, and without dismissing it, because it's like you and I, like Bev, we connected straight away, and it's like, you've had stroke, oh my God. And I'm like, your scar's cool. Do you want to see my scar? Like sure. Like,
compared scars.
Yeah, exactly. And that's cool. Like, and it's an important thing. And even for grief, it's a really important thing to feel connected to people that have a shared commonality as you. Like, I don't dismiss any of it. The thing that just was lacking for me was that in these spaces, they were so supportive, that they were clinical. And I was like, it's a social experience. Yeah. It's not just a clinical experience. It's not just a medical problem. Like there's a medical intervention needed, you know, but once you're living, you know, that we're humans. Like we're socially bound creatures. That's what we're here to do. Yes. So yeah, that's sort of been the ongoing mission for me.
I love that. And we go beyond that. I mean, when you were talking, and I've watched obviously some of your videos, I was given a pamphlet when I left after hospital. That was it. Yeah. That was it. That makes me really sad. Yeah. Still does. That memory that you talk about, you know, that feeling and that grief for me is there, because I really felt so alone. Yeah. You know, sitting down there with the doctor saying, well, Bevan, you really got to understand this. You've had a stroke, and I don't think you understand that. And I'm like, no, I do. But I didn't have really anyone. And a lot that you talk about also is about, you know, they treat the stroke, but they forget about the person in the midst of it all. Yeah. And I really was flipping out. But I'm really good and clever. Yeah. For all those that know me. At hiding that. Yeah. I'm the jokester. I'm the one that tells the jokes. Yeah. You know, when I was in the middle of the stroke, I'm sitting there and I can't speak, and I'm trying to say I look like a beautiful Jesus, you know? While I'm thinking I'm going to die. But no one picked that up, or there wasn't that community, there was enough education to say this guy probably really needs to be looked after. Yeah. And that's why I'm so excited about the things and the journey that you've done and the community that you've developed, because I was just left alone. Yeah. To fend for that. My relationship had finished in the October before the stroke, in the January. I just was shattered. Yeah. And then with the stroke, I was like, for fuck's sake. Yeah.
You're
And-
like, really, bitch?
Really, bitch? Like, karma, bitch?
Yeah.
Like, what have I done? And there was a lot of superficiality about what was going on in me at the time. And
Okay.
that was just a nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, God, now I've got something else. Like,
Yeah.
And the shame meter, obviously, about my own homosexuality was still very much there, too.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
okay. Sure,
Even
sure, sure.
after a 15-year relationship, I was still...
Yeah, but we've all got, and I think we've all got a little bit of that
We do.
internalized homophobia, but, whether it's just because we've been exposed to it. And so
Yeah.
that's another part of the shame spiral.
And I grew up through the 80s. Do I need to say more?
Yeah, right. I
It's
know.
like, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was, I just needed connection for someone to tell me it was, I think we talk about, and you've talked about hope.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
didn't know that there was going to be any good end of story to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that thing on hope as well, and there's this a really amazing TED talk by Charlie Teo about it's called False Hope. There's no such thing, and it's really interesting because I remember I became quite obsessed with a lot of different things in sort of like the first. I don't even know, like let's say the first year to year and a half. Because actually at the time I had a partner, and I mean we were both bloody 24, and so we were only, I just go, oh my God, we were bloody children. And I'm suddenly living with my parents, and my partner was at the time was also a fellow performer, so had their own journey that they're trying to pursue. But whilst I sort of had a lot of, I guess, alone time, I did all this exploration into like Charlie Teo and Brene Brown and to sort of tap into that stuff to find out, like, I guess, what is, the power of hope, the power of vulnerability, the power of all those kind of things. And I think, I remember really early on in my sort of stroke journey, my most the relationship that just meant the most to me was with my speech pathologist. Obviously, because I was a professional singer, going in and having the stroke, and then when I came to all the weeks later, and I was literally non-verbal, like I could not make a sound. And that was because I had unilateral vocal fold paralysis. So I had one of my vocal cords was paralyzed. And the minute that I learned that, well, initially they said it's a paresis. I sort of went from a palsy to a paresis to paralysis in diagnosis, because they're like, maybe it's this, maybe it's actually this. And then they're like, it's paralyzed. Which, again, I can say that, and even with a bit of humor, pep it in there, but that's so we can all breathe. But it's like,
Because that's not great news.
Because it's like, the thing is that is the bit that I was not sure why I even I didn't even know why I should sort of be on Earth, if I'm being honest. I didn't know why. I was like, why this? Like, you can take away my friggin' legs, take away my eyes. Like, I mean, all of those things were damaged as well. But I was like, but don't take my voice. Like, it's the thing that I live by. And so I guess when I started working with my speech pathologist, Nicole, she essentially met a person in a wheelchair with half a head of hair, that could talk like this, and that's how I could talk, because I had all this nasal escape, because on top of the paralysis of my vocal cord, I had a palsy / paralyzed velum, so the soft palate, the sort of the soft fleshy bit at the top of your throat, that was paralyzed as well. So I had no ability to regulate where the breath went. There was all this just air escaping, and that's why I talk like this. And and I remember, like, it's cool because I can actually sort of mimic that voice now. Like, that's an amazing thing. But it literally, like, I'm like, it's a pretty accurate. Like, I'm like, it's a spot on description. I'm like, that acting training didn't go to waste. But it's exactly what it was. And as much as I kind of go, oh yeah, now for the purpose of sort of like re-talking about it, it's like that back then was like the most confronting thing. Like I didn't want to hear my voice. I didn't want anyone to have to ask me anything, so I would have to respond to them.
Mm-hmm.
I just was like, I just want it to be like what I know and what we all know, which is a cold, which is like it's going to last for about 3 days and things will change. And the reality is that when I started working with Nicole, she was having to manage a lot of things. So she, as a speech pathologist, they don't just work on your speech. They actually also work on your swallowing as well, because that's obviously a vital thing when you, need to be able to like sort of live. And I had no ability to swallow at all. Like by the time I finished rehab, I was able to tolerate five teaspoons of water a day. And I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. And it was so cool. I was like, I can do 5. Like, wow. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world.
Oh my God.
And that was because I was fed through it's a peg tube, so a tube in my stomach.
Yeah.
I'm saying a lot of medical. I was like, we're in Grey's Anatomy. I'm like, I had a nasal.
I feel like I should be saying doctor.
Yeah, I know.
Doctor.
I'm like,
yes, doctor.
Yeah, I'm like, if anyone's looking. No. But I had a nasogastric tube, or an NG tube, it's called, and so that's one that goes up your nose. And I started. So I guess the thing is that when I came to, it's not like what I understood coming to, quote unquote, is like. For me, it's a very fragmented, disjointed memento kind of fucking situation where you're going in and out of being lucid and. It was the beginning of essentially what was like actually a PTSD for literally 2 years of memories of things when I would wake up and not know. And anyway, the point of that is that when I came to, and I to answer your sort of, I guess the theme of like, what's it like to not have those things. In the beginning, I didn't know, like literally my body was just a flesh bag that didn't work. So it didn't, and I didn't have any memory of what previous Cal was like either. So because that file kind of wasn't open, I wasn't like, God, I want a McFlurry. Like I didn't think like that because it's like the last
go
thing.
a Big Mac, right?
Yeah,
I know.
There's so much more to go that was way more important than that.
That it just didn't even. It's weird. It's just like it didn't exist. But then it was interesting for weeks, let's say like a good month or so later, they took out, because they eventually take out the nasogastric tube. And then when it becomes like, oh, this is a bit more of a permanent for a while situation, we'll put a peg tube in, which is a surgical procedure where they have to actually go directly through your abdomen and keep a tube in your stomach. And so I had that. And and I remember like I was miming like, oh, like this is vanilla. And someone was like, and I remember a nurse being like, he doesn't know what he's saying. And I was like, look, bitch, it's vanilla. Because I was like, I can tell because it was, so obviously the tubes of my stomach, like the gastric path was starting to work. So I was actually getting some level of taste. But because I'd not eaten for, by that stage, like let's say 2 or 3 months or something like that, I'd had nothing go through my mouth. All my taste buds had gone dormant. Wow. So I couldn't actually tell what taste was. Like it was another, and half my tongue was paralyzed, so I couldn't feel it. It was like, it was a very odd experience. But yeah, so I didn't necessarily go like, God, I want a roast, which my mum thought I would want.
Yeah, mum turns up with the roast.
She's like, God, and that's the funny thing. Like, she actually was like, I want to, like, when I eventually had my first time of being at home with the family, I'd moved from 5 teaspoons of tolerating thin fluids, which is water, to being able to do, I was on a minced mashed moist diet.
Minced mashed moist?
And that is that triple M diet.
Yummy.
That's like, if you, basically when you can sort of like basically pulse anything and you can have it. And so my mum literally vitamized a roast. And like,
what's that like as a paste?
Well, I can't. I remember being like, but it was like, this isn't quite hitting the spot. But it's great. It was more for her to feel like I've provided these dollops of brown and green and orange kind of to you. But yeah, again, so it wasn't like a thing where I fully wanted for that. I knew I wanted it as a hypothetical, but it didn't, I didn't crave it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But going back to that thing about hope that I think is maybe important is like, I remember all those things I didn't have, but I still wanted, I don't give a shit about the roast. I want to be on Broadway. And I remember asking Nicole when I was fully flatlining, not from a heart point of view, but from another measurement point of view where they kind of put electrodes on your throat and try and measure how much things are moving. And I was flatlining. And I asked her, do you think that I will ever swallow? Do you think that I will ever sing again? And she said, I don't know, but I have a lot of hope. And it was that, even still, it's this little, it's so weird. It's I'd been told just before that by textbooks, I'd been fully dismissed by one, ear, nose and throat surgeon who, when I said that it was really hard for me because I'm a professional singer, and he said flippantly, oh, you were a singer. And,
that's devastating.
Yeah, and I had a neurologist tell me that my voice would never change, my gait, so my walking gait would never improve, and I walked like Frankenstein at the time. And all those things are textbook. They're just yep, that's literature, and absolutely I'm sure there's been research done and all of that, but you don't get to be the police of my hope. That's not your responsibility.
Yeah.
I understand, I know that there's argument for what those kind of hard-hitting things can do for someone's motivation and all that sort of shit. And I'm like, bitch, I worked very hard to get into Whopper. So I was like, if that makes sense, I'm going to try very hard to do shit.
Yeah.
You don't need to, actually now you're becoming a footnote in my story, as opposed to being probably a leading player of positivity.
I just can't imagine in any role that I ever had in life not trying to bring out the best in people around me in any situation. Someone in front of me that went through something like you, why wouldn't you want to give them some hope rather than immediately take the human away from it, Yeah.
It's funny because I've kind of I've wondered it too, and this is the empathetic sort of part of me, is for the person that said, when I said it's hard for me because I'm a singer, and he said, oh, you were a singer. At the time I was I literally a part of me died. I was I cannot believe you are joking about this, and I cannot believe that you're telling me that truth and all that. But then the empathetic part of me goes oh, that's that person's work day. That is that person's, I think ill-choiced, but humor. And maybe that's trying to make light of an uncomfortable situation, because I think that's actually the problem there. That person doesn't know how to sit in those uncomfortable feelings. But, the other one, which is why would you dash that person's hope? It's maybe less empathetic, but I go, oh, I can understand what you think you're doing, but you're blind to other possibility there, because I think, had I not had the privileges of, I sort of say I've got 3 privileges, and that's my socioeconomic position, my pigmentation, and my penis. And if I didn't have all those privileges, if I identified in other ways, or I was just born other ways, I might just choose to tap out, because you've just said to me that everything that I'm going to try for is not worth it. So you can do better. I understand you're trying to set a realistic expectation for someone, but you can do better than that.
I think we can all do better, sometimes. Yeah. And when I think about that, about when we do sometimes respond to other people. Like you said, man, you know, I've try and understand why people wouldn't create an environment for that, but I don't think sometimes people go out of their way to do it. Like you just said, sometimes they're in their work mode, but especially in my industry too, it's pretty clinical.
Yeah.
But some people are really in trouble, painfully, whether it's financially and really stressed out. So, yeah, I've worked out that I need to create this environment where hope can grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I understand that even if it's for me aviation.
Yeah.
There are people who are under a lot of stress and just want to be heard and feel like things are going to get better.
Yeah.
And knowing that, you know, after that also event for me was I was so hell-bent on saying I must create environments around other people where hope can grow. I've got to be conscious about that. Yeah, because it just wasn't given to me.
That's
the same
amazing.
as it wasn't given to you. Yeah,
Probably, actually.
Probably, yeah.
And I didn't realise that.
Except
either.
for your lovely speech pathologists.
Yeah.
Shout out to all the speech pathologists. We love them.
Yeah.
We do. I used to be a little speech pathologist assistant.
Did you?
I did.
Oh, bring it on.
Way back in the 80s at Royal Talbot before she came the Austin.
Oh, okay.
So I was up with the brain acquired injury. So
Okay.
I am very au fait with swallowing and pulling.
Oh my
and
God.
have watched a lot of swallowing
Wow.
and pulling videos.
Oh, wow.
How do you now?
I have.
Like, are they G and PG rated, Bevan?
Some of them are.
Some of them are.
Some of them are not.
Some of them are on X-Tube.
Some of them. Red Tube.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Red Tube. Okay,
Yeah,
it's
Red
probably
Tube.
the better
Red,
one.
Is
Red
it
Tube's
better?
old
I
school,
don't
isn't
even
it?
know.
I don't know either.
They're
I mean,
all-
I've never looked at porn.
Neither have I. They're all
The
getting
what?
banned anyway.
Yeah,
You can't look at anything anymore.
Yeah.
Not that I looked at it all. But anywho, but yeah, that the whole hope cycle for me, I think when I had the stroke and after I left and I went down and spent some time with myself, I mean, I ran. I was scared. You know, I couldn't confront anyone.
Yeah.
So I went and grew a garden for the whole year. I went,
Oh, nice.
I went
That's
and did
beautiful.
veggies. Yeah, down in Mount Martha.
Oh, yeah.
But growing veggies for me was the cycle,
Yeah.
there's that hope part. You put a seed in, you
nurture
water
it.
it, you nurture it, you hope that it will germinate.
Yeah.
And then it germinates, and then you hope again by feeding it that it will produce fruit. And I think right there in those you know, peas that I grew and the corn that I grew, it was just a metaphor for me to continually remind me that it was going to get better.
How nice.
Yeah, but I was doing it subconsciously, I think, a lot.
Yeah.
I think I just spent the whole year crying in the dirt, but I needed that. Like I just needed to let go and hopefully find, you know, some hope out of it by just
Yeah.
doing simple things every day.
That's
Yeah.
amazing that you had that sort of resource and that, like, thinking.
I think it was just my upbringing, the basics. A lot of my family grown up on farms,
Yeah.
and you know the cycle of the seasons,
Yeah.
and you just, you know, sometimes there's a really bad season, but they kept on going. That resilience you talk about.
Okay. Yeah.
I was trying to build that resilience back up into me. And I always look at your story and I just think, how did you become resilient? Like how? I mean, there was so many moments in it I just probably would have pushed the I'm out of here button.
Yeah. And I guess that, you know, I love talking about resilience, and I love that you're saying resilience, because I was told for so long, like people were like, oh my God, you're so resilient. And I was like, and I just was like, I am resilient. And then I was like, why am I resilient? I really had to think about it, because I was like, because like everyone, and it was always, I had to really look at it and go, what do they mean when they say like, you're so resilient, and I was like, oh, so it's like when I'm kind of smiling or have something strong, some sort of resolve, like in opposition to something that's really confronting or really challenging. And then I was like, is that it? And I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. But I think the danger for me that I was falling into, especially with, you know, this idea of like being resilient, fed right into that sort of masculine trope that I was stuck in as well, which is like based in like, it's my productivity, as opposed to the practice of resilience, which which for me, I sort of started to look at it and went, and over the time I went, oh, it's like a practice of like reflecting, reframing, and reinventing yourself in any situation. And sometimes that cycle can be like really tiny, where you're like, oh, I should do that differently. Oh, I might do it differently. And then I just do, reflect, reframe, reinvent. And I guess for me, like, I'm still, I'm not like, oh, and he's at reinvention. I'm not like there. I'm just constantly cycling through that thing to remind myself always, like, what matters, like, especially when it comes back to that voice piece, is like, I had to fully reframe what not just my purpose was, but like, what is having a voice? What does that even bloody mean?
Yeah.
Because for me, having a voice was all about trying to belt out a buble or like do my best. And it's suddenly, well, not suddenly, it's just, I've learned that it's not that. It's not about that. It's about, your just authentic expression and willingness to show up and be witnessed by people when you say something that is true, and whether that's confronting or challenging or something that is going to allow for more connection. That is the true having a voice. How it sounds, I mean, if I listen back to this, I'll be like, oh God, I hate my voice, because everyone does, especially gay men. We're all stuck hating our voices. But it's like, well, this is, but have I represented what I believe in that moment? Yes, that's my voice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that manifests itself through the physical voice anyway. I think you have a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
You have such a gorgeous resonant voice.
God.
And like, I'm the same. My life has also been my voice.
Yeah.
Ever since I was, 17, all I've ever wanted to do was stuff with my voice. And I
Yeah.
have up until this point. So I can't imagine losing it physically, but hearing you talk about it,
And it is like, do you know what's really weird about the voice thing? Is, so I went from completely like, I mean, we're on a podcast, so like, if you see this on camera, like, I was just literally miming at the very start.
Yeah.
And then I started being able to do that. And then I started, and this is over months, and then I started talking like this, which is like sort of a pre-Marge Simpson kind of situation. And then it was just under a year in, and I'd been doing therapy. And I mean, when it's like, did I do therapy? I did ancient Russian healing. I've had holy water sprinkled on me.
How was that?
Done it. I mean, there's a whole situation there. I'm more than happy to go into it, but I don't want to hog the entire thing. But it's like, yeah, like I worked so hard on my voice, and on, all the paralysis and all the bits of my voice, because of course I had all the knowledge, I just did not have the functionality. Like, I just had that connection was broken. And so the interesting thing is that I was like strangling this idea of, and I used to, and it's gonna sound so wanky, but I had recordings of my voice, and when I'd sung and stuff like that, and I happened to sing the day that I had my stroke, I happened to sing a song and record it, and it's called Unexpected Song. And it's still is like, okay, because I was teaching it that day to a person that I was teaching singing to, and it's this beautiful song, but it's a very unexpected piece. But I have that recording of me singing it like in my bathroom, like sort of, I don't even know why, but it's interesting because I totally thought that that's the thing, that it's all about having this beautiful sound, like, and this is me, like, I mean, I was not the best singer in the world, do not get me wrong, but like, I had control over my voice. I fully did. But the interesting thing was that I was strangling this idea of having that voice again, and I was doing everything from bloody shock therapy to laser treatment, holy water, every single thing you can think of. And I had amazing, like the best in Australia specialists working with me on this stuff. I was wearing CPAP masks before they were made for anything to do with other than sleep apnea, like weird, cool shit. And the minute that so the day that I was booked in for surgery, a thyroplasty, which was going to basically put an artificial wedge in my throat, to basically move the paralyzed vocal cord, which was bowed up, down into the midline. It meant that essentially my professional singing career was going to be probably over because there's no chance of that. It means that I'll have speaking voice, but because I had the paralyzed vocal cord, the velum, the soft palate and all this other shit, it looked like, it's not going to happen. And it was the same week that I got booked in for this surgery that one day remember, I'll never forget, I was like, a friend had come over to my parents' house and I was like, oh yeah, talk to them. And I went to the bathroom and I came back and I started talking like this. And she was like, what the fuck is going on with your voice? And I was like, I don't know. And I was in this weird Marge Simpson territory and I had no idea. And then it's literally just been a slow trajectory to what you're hearing now.
Yeah, wow.
And it's like, I wonder what was happening sort of on a deeper psychological, emotional, spiritual level of maybe letting go of something and not holding on. And I don't know, like literally, but my last stroboscopy was like, it doesn't move. That was the last stroboscopy.
Right.
And now I know that it doesn't move because there's certain things that the voice will cut out, but you can hear me and that's amazing. Like, so
hear you well and clear.
I've never sort of, I don't know. I guess I've just sort of resolved my daddy issues of my voice.
Well, you have a beautiful voice.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Two Gay Peas in a Podcast. Show us some love, give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Now, Caleb really was so special to have in the studio with us. His story is amazing and so inspirational.
It was so amazing we've had to do what?
Well, there's a second part. We've broken our interview into two because we couldn't stop talking. In part 2 of this chat, we dive into Caleb's dating life and how he rediscovered his body again post-stroke on his recovery journey. Have a listen.